All right, let's just get right into it. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to tackle something that is literally rewiring how we build software. But let's be totally honest here. It is also causing a fair bit of frustration along the way. We are looking at AI coding assistants today, specifically Claude Code, and how to transform this viral set of best practices into a practical, everyday workflow. Now look, if you've been using AI to help you write code, you already know the promise is massive. But the reality? Well, sometimes it feels a lot like wrangling a chaotic genius who just drank about 5 espressos. So we're going to bring some much-needed structure to that whole process today.
But first, let's start with a very real, very painful question. Why exactly are your AI code diffs so messy? You know the feeling, right? You sit down, you give your AI this seemingly straightforward task, and 20 seconds later, boom, you're staring at this massive, sprawling wall of red and green text. It didn't just fix the bug you asked about, it decided to refactor 3 completely unrelated files, changed your variable naming conventions, and oh yeah, rewrote your authentication logic just for fun. And then what happens? You end up spending way more time untangling this giant, messy diff and going down rabbit holes than you would have spent if you had just written the code yourself in the first place. That right there is the exact pain point we are going to solve today.
To do that, our roadmap today is this brilliant, incredibly concise cheat sheet put together by Sudhir Verma called Best Practices for Claude Code. It is just absolutely packed with value, laying out 6 core rules plus 1 major overarching secret to success. So what we're going to do in this explainer is break down Sudhir's list, point by point, and actually transform these isolated rules into a definitive chronological manager's playbook. We are going to learn how to actively manage our AI rather than just chucking prompts at it and, hoping for the best.
Okay, let's start with our first big concept, the junior engineer mindset.
Before we even think about typing a single line of code, we really need a fundamental mindset shift. Now, Sudhir actually puts this at the very end of his list, but we're pulling it right to the front because, honestly, it's the anchor for everything else we're going to talk about. The quote is simple, but it's profound. Treat it like a sharp junior engineer. You cannot treat AI like some magic button where you push it and flawless software just pops out. It literally doesn't work that way. Instead, you've got to manage it like a highly capable, incredibly fast, but ultimately inexperienced junior team member. Sure, it knows syntax, it knows common patterns, but it doesn't intuitively know your specific project's history, your weird business logic, or your team's unspoken rules. Once you adopt that management mindset, everything else starts to fall perfectly into place.
So, moving on to the next logical step in our playbook, onboarding your AI assistant.
Think about it like this. What is the very first thing you do when you hire a real-life junior engineer? You don't just point them to a desk and walk away, you onboard them. Point number 1 from our source tells us exactly how to do this for AI. You give it a Claude.md file. Why is this so crucial? Because the AI actually reads this file every single session. It is the ultimate onboarding document. You absolutely have to fill this file with your project conventions, those hidden gotchas in your architecture that always trip people up, and very explicitly, how to run your tests. If you don't provide this context up front, the AI is basically flying blind every time you start a new chat. By setting up this file, you're essentially bringing your sharp junior engineer up to speed the exact moment they clock in for the day.
All right, they are onboarded. Next up, setting up constraints. Now that your AI is up to speed, how do you actually assign it tasks? Well, here is rule number 1. Never ever rely on implied assumptions. Letting the AI just guess your boundaries is a total recipe for disaster. Instead, you need explicit constraints. Sudhir's advice here is crystal clear. Tell it what not to do explicitly. He gives a perfect example in the cheat sheet. Just tell the AI, hey, don't refactor unrelated code. By simply giving it negative constraints, you are drawing a firm box around the task. You're actively managing the scope, and as Sudhir notes, this specific instruction is exactly what saves you from those messy, sprawling diffs we were talking about earlier.
And that brilliantly leads us right into the next concept from point 2, plan mode. This is huge. Before the AI writes any code at all, you let it run in plan mode. You literally ask it to outline how it intends to solve the problem first. Why do we do this? Because, as Sudhir points out, letting the AI plan catches wrong assumptions before they become wrong diffs. If the AI's plan involves touching files it shouldn't or using some random library you don't want, you can step in and correct your junior engineer right then and there. It ensures everything aligns perfectly with your constraints before a single line of code is committed.
Okay, so the plan is approved. Now let's talk about managing the actual execution. The constraints are set and the AI starts typing. But again, A good manager doesn't just hand a junior developer a massive feature ticket and disappear for a month, right? You oversee the work. The workflow here is really simple. Plan, check in at milestones, and take small incremental steps. Sudhir explicitly writes that small, reviewable steps are far, far greater than one giant run. You really want to see that progress incrementally. This keeps the AI on track and stops it from going down those massive, divergent rabbit holes that just waste everyone's time.
But what happens when the task inevitably gets complicated? That brings us to point 4, using subagents. Sometimes your junior engineer hits a wall and needs to do a deep dive into some documentation or research a weird API. If you let your primary AI instance do all of this heavy research in your main chat window, its context gets totally cluttered, it gets confused, and it loses the thread of the actual task. Sudhir advises using subagents for these research-heavy digressions. By offloading that heavy lifting, you keep your main AI context perfectly clean and sharply focused on actually executing the code. Finally, the AI pops back up and tells you the task is complete. Do you just accept it? Hit merge? Absolutely not. Blindly rubber stamping done is super dangerous. The true manager's approach requires actually verifying the claims and reading the diff. Just like you would never merge a junior developer's pull request without reading it first, you must verify what Claude Code claims it has accomplished. You have to read the diff and make absolutely sure it truly meets your standards.
Which brings us to our final section, the ultimate productivity lever.
We've gone through all the steps, but Sudhir Verma actually leaves his most important secret for last. He marks it with a bright asterisk right at the bottom of the document. Here's the bold takeaway. The biggest lever isn't the tool, it's how clearly you scope the ask. Really think about that for a second. No matter how advanced Claude Code gets, no matter how many millions of tokens it can process or how incredibly fast it can generate text, the ultimate productivity lever remains entirely in your hands. It is your ability to clearly define, constrain, and scope the task. The tool is really just a force multiplier for your own management skills. Basically, if your ask is messy, your code's going to be messy.
And that brings us to the end of our explainer. I want to leave you with a pretty provocative question to reflect on today. Take a hard look at your own workflow. Are you actually scoping your AI tasks like a manager? It really is time to ditch that magic button mentality. Stop expecting the AI to just magically read your mind and start actively managing your workflow with a Claude.mem file, explicit constraints, planned milestones, and careful, thorough reviews. Because when you finally step up and manage the process, well, that is when AI truly becomes the revolutionary tool it was always meant to be.